Okay, just a quick little backstory about Hardy the Hat Guy here before we get into our next guest here. I when I stopped my coaching career, and I always put quotes around the word coach if it involves me because I was really just the adult on the field, and that's even that's questionable. But I always said, in talking to a lot of the dads and everything, I always wanted to, when I retire or when I have the time, I always wanted to find a way to give back and to help with inner city baseball or just uh, any support I could provide to help those who there's so many baseball opportunities out there. A lot of them require a lot of financial burden, so I wanted to find a way to help in that regard. So I'm going online, and lo and behold, I come upon the organization called The Base. My hands went up in the air, and I said, "This is exactly what I wanted to do." So how tickled to death was I to find out that they now have a organization in Indianapolis. The Base has came to Indy, and in this program we're talking about here, the top baseball stories out of Indy for 2019. We can't have that show without having the story of the Base coming to Indiana. And I couldn't be more excited to have our guest who's with us here today, Rob Barber, who's the executive director of the Base here in Indiana. And Rob, thank you for taking the time to do this. Like I said, it's doing a show about top stories of baseball in Indiana. This to me is one of, if not the top story. So I'm anxious to hear just as much as the people chiming in here or logging in to see this show. I'm excited to hear about you, how you got into the Base, that evolution of your career that has led you to the Base, the history of the Base, what the Base coming to Indiana means, how do people get involved? I want to hear everything about it. I'm going to be quiet and just be a sponge and turn things over to you. But, to start with, let's talk about your background. You've got background in Indiana. You've worked with some big names, some of them right here in my hometown of Brownsburg. So take us that evolution of Rob Barber's career that's led him to right here the Base in Indy.
Yeah, I wasn't growing up. I grew up down in Jennings County, southern Indiana, down in the Seymour Columbus Hoosier Girls Conference. Came up and had played there. I was not a very good baseball player, though. My dad was a Dodgers fan. I was not good. And I thought my dad just, looking back, he's gone now, but I look back and he took me to spring training in Vero Beach, was just a passionate fan and continued to expose me to baseball. He didn't coach my teams, but he put me on and sent me to camps. And so I just was not very good. I wasn't very good athletically or anything all the way through junior high. And then, as sometimes happens, as I got to 8th grade, I started lifting weights. And it was really the first time I'd done anything in my life that I had done something, and I thought, I just did more weight than my buddies had been working out. And as happens, with weights, is it began to change my body, change my athleticism. So by the time I was a freshman at Jennings County, and by the way, I think people put me behind the plate to catch because it's a little chubby kid putting back there. Nobody's really stealing anyway. Maybe some balls will bounce off him. He'll sweat off a few pounds and be good for him, toughen him up. And so I was a catcher. But so happens, as God will have it, that it put me really in a place where I didn't know at the time, but that I could eventually excel. And so as I got to be a freshman at Jennings County, I was asked to come in and catch some of the senior pitchers just to do that. In the fall, I went from not playing very much football at all, being on the team but not playing, to really being a starting and then a most valuable player on the freshman team. By the time I was a sophomore, I started varsity with baseball and football. By the time I was a junior, I was all conference. By the time I was a senior, I was all state, and then I got a scholarship to go to Indiana. So things really changed for me during that 4-year period. But my dad taught me the right approach to it, and particularly that was to control the things I could, which was hustle and to work hard. That I could keep working regardless of what was happening. And so I did that, and then going on, and I was able to go on and lettered 4 years and was a captain at Indiana University in the late 80s. So had a nice career there and enjoyed that. So, but it was always my teaching coach was going back to, when if I can do it, you can do it. There's lots of kids out there that are not great athletes. And basically, one of the things we love about baseball is you don't have to be, you don't have to be Aaron Judge. You can be Jose Altuve, and you can be just as good. And there's opportunities and positions and colleges and places for us all. And that's what excited me. And so I've always been a fan of underdogs, of this game, and love it because I think it's a lunch pail game that blue collar guys can just go out there and work themselves into a position if they're just willing to put the time in to do it. So that's what excited me. That's what a little bit of what got me at least to my starting point in baseball.
Well, and then so you go on. You say you played at IU. There's some big name coach there. I think you're involved with, and I think as we go after college, you stayed involved with Coach Mercer Sr. And in your first, or maybe not right away, but you got involved with him somehow, and then take us down that path. So you're graduated. Now you got to pay the bills. You got to keep the lights on. And which I love to hear this story. And just to kind of interject for a second, because anybody who's watched all this series up to this point, another recurring theme: you love baseball. There's a career there. There's careers in baseball outside of coaching, and we're talking to one perfect example here. And as Mr. Barber, as we talk about your career that led up to the base now, for you viewers listening in, this is just another example of a career outside of coaching that involves baseball. And so take us through that path. Like I said, you were with Mercer there for a while. You got involved with some in the travel leagues with some people that are still big names today. And so take us through that path.
Sure. When I had finished my playing career, you get 5 years to play 4, and I played 4 straight through. So I had a 5th year on my scholarship, which meant that my scholarship was room and board and books. It generally gave tuition to out-of-state players. So, but I only had 9 hours. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, was still at IU. And so I said, I can take a 5th year. I can look for a job. I can work a little bit, and I still have my housing and my books paid for. So I stayed there. But that summer, after I finished my career, I went back home and said, I don't know what I want to do. I'm going to graduate with a sports marketing and management degree. I don't want to get just a temporary job for the summer. So I thought, my coach made me going down to Tennessee, made me fold brochures of the Bob Morgan baseball camp, and it made me mad. I was like, God, why do I have to do this? I'm a captain of the team. Fold these brochures. I could do this. And it put this idea in my head that I go, I'm going to do this when I go home. I'm going to go back and give back to my community. So for the week, I went back there and I charged kids $25 to come for Monday through Friday. I went and hired some of my buddies I'd played against at Columbus North, at Columbus East, at Seymour, Jennings County. And about 9 of us got together, paid them, and we ran a camp for a couple of weeks. And I went out and got local sponsors when I knocked on doors and said, hey, we'll put your name on a T-shirt and this. And I came back and I did pretty well. I'd made about $10,000 from the summer. And I go, that was a good summer job. So when I started going through the interviews, I started pulling this stuff out and go, well, I wasn't present for tourney because I was playing baseball. That was my job. But here's what I did in this last summer. And I started showing some of these things. Here's what I did. And so I continued that for the next few years, and I got a job in Atlanta, and then went to seminary in Texas because I thought, I want to do something to impact kids. I want to do something, and I didn't know if that was through church, if that was the ministry, or what that looked like at that time. But I spent some time down there. I got married at the time, and then an old coach of mine he's not old. He's only just 6 or 7 years older than me. But he was our hitting coach at Indiana, Jeff Mercer, and he was at Southport. Loved him, just tremendous hitting coach, a mentor, a friend. Called me and said, I have this business called Mercer Sports Center, and I'm at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, and I've got too many people. I need some help. I need some full-time help. I'm writing this book with Dusty Baker called You Can Teach Hitting, and Marv Bittinger. And he said, I want to come up here and do this. Let's talk about what we can do. So I drove up from Texas. He and I sat down. We went out and looked out to a place. He was looking out in Greenfield that's become Bandit Yard and became a place. And so we went out there. We moved out there, went into a horse barn and said, yeah, we can hang some lights in here, and we can put down some turf and some batting cages. And so he and I went out there, partnered together, and he had 2 little boys at the time, Daniel and Jeffrey. Daniel passed away tragically in high school. Tough story. His older brother, Jeffrey, was just kind of around, both of them around funny, great kids, loved it, being around his dad. And of course, now Jeffrey's the head coach at Indiana. And told him several times, I said, man, everybody calls him Jeff. And I still think of him as Jeffrey, but he's established himself, and Jeff has said it, and I certainly believe it. He's taken, the concept and the approach of hitting to a completely different level from where Jeff and I were. But Jeff was a mentor to me, a friend to me. And so he left, went back. He just said, I want to go back into teaching and coaching. I kind of like that part of it. So he left. So at that point, it became Triple Crown. And we had an indoor facility. There was another place that popped up, a friend of mine, Chris Seastep, that had Round Tripper at the time. Yeah. And it started sort of the opening of the facilities. And I think at that point, Jeff and two teammates of mine, Jeff Flynn and John Teal, John kept asking, he's from Youngstown, he's a freshman roommate of mine. He goes, "Where do you play in the summer in Indiana?" And I go, "Jennings County." I played for my high school team. We play like Versailles, we play other conference teams. He go, "Man, you don't have like a all-star team you go around and play?" And I said, "No, we play for our high school team." And he said, "Man, that's great." He said, "I grew up in Youngstown." He said, "We put it together." He said, "I really think that'd be a great thing." John and Jeff got to be, were good friends, teammates. Both were in my wedding. And both of those got with Dave Taylor. And they had been some of the founders of the Indiana Bulls. And so when I came back up, even when I was in Texas, I said, "We've got our first Bulls team we're coaching. Let's come watch us play." And I said, "Cool." John married a girl, Ann, from Jasper. I was in their wedding down in Jasper, and he said, "We picked up a girl. We picked up a kid from down in Jasper. It was one of Ann's friends. He's our shortstop on our team. We got a kid from Lafayette. It's a center fielder. He goes, a good team." I watched the team, and I thought, man, these guys have got something. This is great. It's one of the first Bulls teams. Shortstop, of course, Scott Rowland. Not a bad player.
Not too shabby, yeah.
Not too shabby. Todd Dunwoody in center field, Matt McCarty. So really a pretty good team to start out. And I was involved as board advisory assistant coach just with Jeff at that point. And then as I got into the late 90s, early 2000s, I said, "Well, why don't you coach an 18-year-old team, our 18-year-old team?" It's a good way to get involved. And so Craig Moore was coaching the 17-year-old team. I took the 18-year-old team, coached them for 3 years. Really enjoyed it, and knew that there were other organizations that were beginning to pop up, the Bandits, Harold Gibson, and Greenfield, where we had left. And Triple Crown sort of, we sold the facility actually in Greenfield. And so Harold took it for the Bandits, put in some more fields and did some things. We moved up to the north side and then up to Noblesville and had different variations of our facility. The Bulls, of course, continued to do some things, but I decided that I was going to start maybe an alternative because I still felt there were a lot of guys that wanted to play that just didn't have the opportunities because they weren't Bulls caliber players. Mm-hmm. So the Bulls didn't think they were their caliber players or were late developers. And so I started U.S. Athletic at that point in 2004. And so I continued to do that every year. And in 2018, that was one of the things with the base, is I decided that I needed to hand that over actually to a young man I had who was 9 years old in 2018, Wes Whistler. And as high school coach, Denny Cass and I were, good friends and worked with Wes. So we had him at 9 all the way through UCLA, the White Sox. And he'd come back and he was helping with this. So I handed over to him and he runs it. And I said, "I've got to step away from everything here. So I'm out of any conflicts of anything, just to be able to run the base and to be able to go and challenge and ask for support." So I ran that, did lessons. I'd been involved, of course, as some of the young people that I'd worked with had gone on to, like the Kyle Gibsons, the Drew Storins, and the hundreds of kids that have gone in college. And I always viewed that what we did is not as the thing that made the difference. I viewed us as part of a team that included their high school coaching staffs, that included private instructors, because as you know, that in high school, there are just limits to what a high school coach can do. It's not paid a lot, don't have a lot of the resources. You're competing with gym space sometimes with wrestling teams and high school coaches. And I thought that we have ability done right to be able to communicate with them and to supplement and support them and their players. But one of the things that had happened along the way, both with U.S. Athletic and with private lessons and with teams, is that, of course, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to time. There's a cost to facilities. There's a cost to travel. The cost of tournaments and that continued to go up. And so the game just became more and more expensive. there were parts of it that I absolutely loved. I love the father-son relationships that I have to this day that I've enjoyed all the way. Matter of fact, I can't hardly think of a kid that I worked with, but I can't think of his dad that we talked to about the things that they were working through at the time. And they've continued all the way through college and even past in a lot of cases. And to me, that's sort of the real payment and the real enjoyment that I've received from what we've done. But during that time, was aware that there was a group of kids that were not having access to this. The teams were pretty white. The teams were pretty getting more affluent, and just saw that in the cost of a baseball bat. And the cost of the teams, were going up to keep pass. The cost of the tournaments, when you say it's 1,000, when I'm going to a tournament and a perfect game at the time, I'm going and realizing it's $1,600 and then $2,100 and then $3,000 and then the hotel and the cost, it just is insane. So in 1993, when I was back here, there's an article in the Indianapolis Business Journal, and it talked about Grand Slam sports marketing. It said African-American gentleman that's started this program here. He runs a sports marketing. Well, if you come back and you're a baseball guy, don't you have to talk to this guy? And so like you, I called Milt Thompson and I said, can I meet with you? And I talked to him about what we were doing and ideas that he had. And he said, well, you can get involved. I got a program called the Indiana Amateur Baseball Association. And he said, we're doing this here, and we've got some places where you can go down and do some clinics. So I did. Went down to Tech, started doing some intercity clinics. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the first clinics that I had, the second day, there were two brothers, and the fastest kid in the camp wasn't there, but his brother was. And I looked at his brother, and I said, where's your brother? He says, the fastest kid in the camp here. And he said, he's a juvie. And he said, he'll be here after it. And I said, excuse me? And he said, he's a juvie. He'll be here in a little bit right after. And I said, oh, he's a juvie. And he said, yeah, he'll be here. And I thought, and the kid showed up, was the sweetest kid, probably 13, 14 years old. And so over the years, I used US Athletic and our coaches to say, as I got familiar with some of the kids and the families over the years, to bring them out. But it was still us going down into the city, picking them up and bringing them back. And it was hard to make everything line and really make the kind of difference that you want. So through that time, I was involved. They hired my clinics. It became RBI, and they were doing some good things in the city. But I still felt like there was a gap that we were providing access for some kids, and they were getting to play. But through Heritage Christian, where my kids had gone through school and my wife had taught, and I live, right across the street, we were coaching, and we'd play some of the city schools. And it was pretty much the coach initially, the first year, Dan said, well, let's get a 10-run lead, and then we'll back off. Well, I learned after that first year, and Dan and I would talk and say, that could be the first inning. You got to play 4.5. What do you do? And then the game became, well, telling our guys, go up, bat left-handed. Go up, strike out, but don't look like you're striking out. Get picked off, but don't look like it. And I looked at the look on these kids' face, and it crushed me that I saw these young people out there, and I said, they're not playing baseball like you and I are playing baseball, and they don't understand. Why are they even showing up if this is the kind of game that they see? Because they love it and they want it to be something, and it can be something for them, but they just don't have the private instruction. They don't have the teams. They don't even have the kind of support that they need. And so as Dan and I had coached and worked together, we started saying, you know what, we're probably going to win these games, just not even trying. So we said, we're not going to steal in the first inning. We're not going to take extra bases. But I always loved, and we became more engaging with the kids and had fun. And the kids at Heritage would talk to them and be supportive. And I always appreciated that and thought that was the right approach. But it wasn't until it was 2017, I fell off a ladder, fractured my skull. I was putting up a batting cage. The ladder gave out from under me, hit my head. It was a week in intensive care. Doctor said, you can't coach. So I'm still running this program. So I'm sitting, I'm doing all the other stuff. And Dan, we're using Heritage's field for a pastime tournament and as one of the sites. And so a team comes across the field, all black and brown Hispanic kids. And so they're there. Now, I've seen enough games that I'm usually not going to hang around to watch a full game at 17 unless I've got some sort of compelling connection to somebody there. Normally it's hand him the baseballs, I'll be back in 2 hours. And so I handed him the baseballs, met the coach, pleasant guy, just had a short conversation. I gave him a little bit of a hard time because I knew they were from Boston, and it was just after the Deflategate scandal. And so I did say, I think I might have to check your baseball bats and make sure everything's legal and equipped. And of course, we had this laugh back and forth. But I went in the stands. There was 3 African-American ladies up there, and I started watching the team play just for inning. It started off, and I noticed they were really chanting and clapping, and it was a lot of it in Spanish. I noticed that there were 22 kids. There was nobody sitting back here with their arms crossed that was pissed that they weren't playing. There was nobody. Matter of fact, the catcher took a called third strike, came out, hit his bat on the ground like a 17-year-old kid will do. 2 of the kids, not the coaches, came over to him and said, all in Spanish, no. You say the same, we need you, no. And I could see the kid going this way, shaking his head, yes. And he got it. I saw just some energy, some excitement. I asked the ladies in the stands, so are you the moms of these kids? They said, no, we're staff of the base. And I said, I see it on their shirt. What is the base? And they said, well, all these kids were pretty much in a gang intervention program in Boston. And the coach of the team ran that program, and a guy challenged him to get out of what he was doing, which was working for the Boston Foundation with that program, and to bring that program along with this Boston Astros team that he had, and to use it as a vehicle to reach more young people. And so he said, so this is what's going on. And I said, that is unbelievable. So I watched the game. Afterward, they said, you have to meet, talk to Robert again, the guy that's the founder of the program and team. And I said, cool. I met him, and Robert immediately said, you got to go home and look up Joe. Joe, won a Pulitzer Prize, and Joe had done this, roasted for the Boston Globe. Well, he was a short white guy that was a scorekeeper, one of the few guys there. And so I left, and I thought, man, they're not scheduled at the game again, not scheduled to play at the field again. I thought I really enjoyed talking to him. I went home and Googled him, and I said, who's this Joe Kahn? And then Joe Kahn, and got me go, wow, this guy did. Won all kind of awards writing for the Boston Globe. And I thought, but I'm going to look up Robert Lewis. And I looked up, and the Boston Journal popped up and said, the 50 most influential people in Boston. Number 28, Robert Lewis. I said, that guy I just met in shorts and T-shirt coaching that team. And then I read some about him, and then I looked up the base, and I go, well, it rained that night. That evening it was pouring rain. Pastime redid the schedule, and they said, I looked out and I go, they're back. There's like 16 fields around Indianapolis. I go, they're coming back to play doubleheader tomorrow. My wife says, it doesn't matter. She goes, look at the weather. She goes, there's another storm coming through from Canada to Mexico. It's just red. It's going to wipe it the rest of the way out. And I said, well, the field's a little bit wet, but we're going to play. I said, we're going to get these games in tomorrow. She said, no, look at that. She says, look at the weather and then think that. I looked at the weather and I said, we're still going to play. And she said, why do you keep saying that? And I go, because I'm supposed to meet them tomorrow. I'm supposed to talk more to Robert Lewis in the base and find out more about what this is about. And so she said, okay, whatever. So I go to bed, I get up, Dan, I swear, next morning, blue sky, sunshine. That had broken up. There was nothing. I was so happy when I saw them coming across the field. They had an incident after they left here that night at Grand Park that Caribbean baseball, is a lot noisier. It almost strikes them as sometimes as girls fast pitch softball here because there's chants and stuff like that. They were up at Grand Park. One of the umpires called him Bush and went over and made him stop and got in face. And these are young men. By the way, when I met these young men, they were coming over, introducing themselves to me, shaking my hand, looking me in the eye, and said, thank you for coming. They weren't dressed like I would typically, in baseball, I'm pretty straightforward guy in that I like your hat a certain way. I like you dress a certain way. Don't wear jewelry. Don't wear this. Don't make all. These guys were different in that respect. And I thought that's maybe just a cultural difference, but I like the way they played a lot. I like the way they were as a team. Mm-hmm. And so I watched, so they started the game again. I talked to Robert in between games, and I went out there and he asked a little bit about my background. I said, down in Southern Indiana, my grandfather was married 7 times. True. And I said, so I was around for my dad. And I said, but one of the guys in the community that affected my dad, and by the way, my dad passed away in 2010, I stood at his casket for 12 hours, and there was a 3-hour line out the door to come through of all the things that he had done and the impact that he had made. And there's several reasons for that. But one of those reasons was an African-American, one of the few African-American families in there, and the families, and the guy named was Bill Harmon. And my dad had since and Reds tickets. And so as a Dodgers fan, we'd go over there, and my dad and Bill and some others, but a lot of times Bill and my dad and I would go over to a Reds game, and Bill would tell stories of growing up in New Washington, Indiana with his brother. And he would say, we had a great high school coach, a great town. We'd go play sometimes somewhere, and that's where the Klan was flaring up in southern Indiana. And they would say, everybody can go except those two boys. They can't. They got to sit on a bus. And coach would say, then everybody back on the bus, then we're not going to eat here. And I could not believe at 8, 9, 10 years old that to nice Mr. Harmon that was happening. My dad was a realtor. Bill built houses at that time, built one of our houses, and was just a kind man. Well, he had a son that was about 10 years older than me. He had actually a couple sons and a daughter. But one son went on and had walked on at IU and played baseball. But his other son was a basketball star. He came the same year as Kent Benson came out. And Jennings County had a tremendous basketball team. We'd take 10 buses to see him. So he was my hero growing up. His name's Billy Harmon. Well, Billy and Danny Brown went on to play basketball at the University of Louisville back in the mid to late 70s. Lost one of their national championships to UCLA. He came back to Jennings County. He was working with his dad. When I made the Indiana All-Star team, Harmon Construction was my sponsor on the back of my shirt. When I was playing my freshman year at IU, Bill, my dad said, well, Billy played at Louisville. This is cool. I'll bring Bill down there. I was a freshman. I didn't play an inning. But I came out of the dugout, and I was just embarrassed. And I was like, I'm sorry, you really came down, and I didn't play. And Bill Harmon said, no. He said, Rob, you look so good to be in that uniform. He said, you don't realize what it takes just to put that uniform on. You're a freshman. He said, you've got a long future. He said, I just couldn't be more proud of what you've done and what you look like in that. He said, that's just right. I could feel like the weight fell off my shoulders, my dad's shoulders. And Bill was the kind of guy that when my dad saw him in the community, he wouldn't come up and say, hey, I saw Rob hit 2 doubles, or I saw you hit a home run last night. He'd be the first guy to say, how's April doing, my sister? He'd say, now, is she in cheerleading this year, or what's she going to do? Is she going to play? And would ask things about her, my mom, the family, education, and just had a great perspective there. Well, one of the times we went over to the game, he said, well, my brother used to play for the Cincinnati Reds. And he said, now he's a McGregor dealer. Well, at 12 years old, I liked the McGregor part of it because he gave me a McGregor catcher's glove. And he talked about playing for the Reds, but he was retired at that point. So later on, I learned, that the significance of that Chuck Harmon was the older brother, a great athlete in his own right in basketball, and was the first African-American player to play for the Cincinnati Reds. I met him a couple of times. Bill, I got to know. Bill passed away. His sons took over his business. So now Harmon Steel and Construction is one of the largest minority-owned steel construction firms in the Midwest. Good friends of ours, still down in North Vernon in Jennings County. His daughter came over and had a chance to meet her and recognize, and the city of Indianapolis made, I think it was April 23rd, Chuck Harmon Day in Indianapolis, and so the launch of our event. But one of the things that Robert did, he said, I want you to come to Boston. So when I met him on the field, he said, I want you to come to Boston. He said, I want you and your wife, I want to just show you what we're doing. And I was so enamored by the fact, they said, by the way, all these kids are going to college for free and not on baseball scholarships. None of them. Although most of them will play baseball. And I thought, how in the world do you do that? And it doesn't cost them anything to travel on there. He said, but it costs them. He said, you earn your spot. He said, I get 2 of my best players who don't come. He said, because we've got tutoring, SAT classes, it's a sort of character development program. And he said, if they don't do that, he said, then they don't come. He said, but financially, it doesn't cost them anything. So I was so enamored by this. My wife and I go to Boston. We show up. We go into the hood, which Robert reminds us that the neighborhood is just neighborhood. It's just the last part of neighborhood. It's the hood. It's the Tuffer area in Roxbury in Boston. We go in there. They're launching a girls baseball program. They've got Maybelle and Shirlene, who was in the 2 featured Donna and Gina Davis in a league of their own. The 2 ladies are actually there. They're kicking that off. I meet them. We go to the event that night. First he says, he brings over Shanice, a young lady, young 15-year-old, says, Shanice, can you show Mr. and Mrs. Barber around the base? And it's only about 6,000 square feet, so it's not a big place, half of it's office space. She looks at me and she says, hi, I'm Shanice. And I said, hi, I'm Rob Barber. She says, nice to meet you, Mr. Barber. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Barber. Walks us around, pleasant. I'm thinking, I'm not sure my own kids This polite and respectful. Takes me around. I'm getting introduced. I see one of the kids that I saw that summer, this is now November. One of the kids comes up and says, "Hey, good to see you again." Gives me a handshake and a hug. The staff says, "We've heard all about you," to me. Come, give me a hug. Robert says, "It's great seeing you." Gives me a hug. I come down, I'm going to a fundraiser. Robert says, "I don't want you to give anything. I just want you to show up to this fundraiser." By the way, he said, "Come a little bit early. I want to introduce you to somebody." And I said, "All right." Wife and I come early. Says, "Why don't you come upstairs?" We come upstairs. Rob, Nicole, Pedro Martinez, Rob, Nicole Barber. Oh, wow. This extraordinary. I got some pictures taken with him. We go to the event. It's a first-class event downtown at the Reggie Lewis Center. The governor is there, Republican governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, Marty Walsh, the Democratic mayor. We're talking about, that was during the election year, and talking about all of the politics that's going on. They said, "We set this aside for the good of the kids. We don't care what party affiliation you are. Together today, we're working for the benefit of these kids and raising money." And the police chief was there. Next morning, Robert picks me up and is a humble guy, powerful speaker, Martin Luther King type of voice, but doesn't drop that. I thought when you go there, I thought it'd be his show. Everybody just talking about Robert Lewis and pictures of him and all he's doing. And it was completely the opposite. It was other people talking about the kids, him talking about the kids, but it was other people. It was the governor saying, "Robert Lewis, you keep doing what you're doing. You're changing lives." It was the mayor saying that. It's Pedro Martinez. It's the police chief and superintendent in Boston. And I just could not believe, what I saw. But he says, "I want to pick you up the next morning after the event." I know he's got a million things going on. Hundreds of people were at this event. Picks me up, drives me around. We go to breakfast, takes me down into the neighborhood, shows me kind of where he's from. We're talking about more about my background and the influence that the Harmon family had on me coming from where I come from. And he's talking about the moments sometimes that make us. And he said, he said one time, he said, I was working here and President Clinton asked me to go with him over to speak in over in South Africa. And he said, so I spoke with Nelson Mandela and met before him. And I thought, wow. And he said it so casually, I about fell out of my chair. And then he talked about in his other role that he worked with David Cameron when there was race riots in Great Britain. And so I'm beginning to say, why did he bought our plane tickets and hotel to come there? And so I said, why am I here? He go, I'm a white guy. I go, I'm gonna go back. I go, I love what you're doing here, but maybe some concepts we can bring back in here and do some stuff. And he said, I just wanted you to see it and to experience it. And he said, if I can help you in any way, he goes, you just let me know. So I follow them in November. I see him the next summer. That fall, he says, hey, one of their supporters initially was Theo Epstein. And he said, Theo is now with the Cubs. And he said, there's some talk about us going to Chicago because they've got some terrible violence problems. They got some terrible problems with their kids, and go, this maybe can be part of the solution. So he asked me to drive up. I drive up at 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm there till 11. I turn around and drive back that night, just meeting with some community leaders up there, but Robert was up there and I was so happy to see me. I went back to an event at Boston, this time on my own dime. Again, met some of the same people, began to get a better picture of this. Again, went to lunch with Robert, and he said, we've got some funders in Indianapolis, Strata, that had given money here. He said that maybe we could think about if there's a need there, maybe there's some things we could do. And so I said, sure. Robert came back that summer. We talked again, just kind of getting to know him, just going to see the kids and finding out legitimate, the real deal. That fall, he says, hey, we're going to launch at the Cubs headquarters, corporate headquarters at Wrigley Field. Will you come up for the event? Of course. I drive up. Theo Epstein, Peter Gammons are all there. They announced the launch of the base. He pledges $150,000. Strata continues $25,000. There's TV stations placed all over, right next to Wrigley Field. And just a terrific, modest-sized event, maybe 100 people. And it's talking about launching the base in Chicago. I go back up to their event. It's again the third time I've been there. And they say, we're going to move it because Sam Kennedy, the president of the Boston Red Sox, has opened it up. And so we're going to move it to the spring. So they're in November. We're going to open and we're going to have our big fundraiser at Fenway Park in May. And so I come back in May. It's at Fenway Park. It's just a tremendous event up on the big speakers. The kids are hitting on the field. We see the World Series trophies. We're walking around. It's the 40th anniversary of the first team that he had. And so just tons and tons of excitement. But through that, Robert and I, have a conversation, and he said, what about you bringing the base to Indianapolis? And I said, I'm a white guy. And I said, do you need me to find somebody that will look more like, he said, stop. He said, we need, if we're going to solve some of the issues in this country, he said, we need both of us. We need the Black community. We need the white community. He said, there's some places, he said, that I can't speak, he said, as well as what you're going to be able to speak to, and some other places. And he said, it needs to be a diverse voice. He said, but that doesn't mean that every leader of a movement to provide opportunity. And he said, and the demographics of Indianapolis, he said, are different than in Boston. He said, there are white young poor kids that are left behind. There are Hispanic poor kids that are left behind. He said, so it's less about the color of somebody's skin and about the need and the lack of access to opportunities. And so what I saw with Robert, I saw as a man that had a powerful ability to change a community, because at that point I was seeing like Assumption College say, tonight we're announcing that we're giving 4 full scholarships to base student athletes. And then in the 5th year, we're going to give a master's level scholarship. And the president of the university is saying, these young people are coming on our campus and making such an impact. We want more of them. So Roberts ended up raising about $35 million up in the Northeast in academic and need-based scholarship for these kids. So what a nice thing to be able to go to a school and say, we've got a kid, we can help them get into to school financially. They've got all the taken care of. It doesn't need to take any of baseball money. They just need a spot and opportunity. By the way, they're pretty good, and they've developed in good players. So that's what happened. So we see these kids now that are going in, and 90% of them are graduating from college, and now they're coming back in and they're giving. So one of the best ways that I've been able to frame the base as to what it means to me is to say, my grandparents probably fought like crazy to get to first base in life. But they did. My parents probably started out on first base in life. I probably started out on second base. My kids probably started on third base in life. But the responsibility that I think that we've all felt, and this is why I probably even led to this conversation with you, was to say, at some point, we're going to be successful and we're going to cross the plate in life. When we cross that plate, it's incumbent upon us to stop and to look around, because there are going to be people who are at the plate who have 2 strikes on them, be people who can't even get to the plate. And one of the responsibilities I think we have as a society is to use whatever means necessary we have to reach out to those folks and to help them find a way somehow to first base, and to teach them how to walk, and then how to run, and how to get stronger. And then as they hit first base, they begin to find their own stride. And I think what I saw with the base were these young people that found their stride, that were now hitting third, were now crossing the plate. And a year and a half ago, I went into the base and there was a big $50 check. Normally the ones that are like the $10,000 check, a $50 check. And I thought, this is interesting. I thought, I'm going to ask about this. And sure enough, it was a young man that had graduated from the base. He graduated from college. He got his first check in real estate. And he said, I'm giving $50 back to the base, and donated. And I've now met kids that are coming back into and working for the base part-time. The base is involved in saying, we want jobs for our kids too during the summer, and not just sweeping the floor. We want a job where you can teach them technology. So we partnered with universities. Like MIT has a STEAM lab in our facility in Boston now. And Dr. Topper Carew at MIT, African-American prominent guy in technology, has found this and said, we want these kind of opportunities, because this is how you change communities. And so that's what I saw. I saw this as an opportunity to use a game I love, America's national pastime, and to say, you're kidding me. This can be something. So it's a carrot, it's an incentive for young people, and we've all heard it. We've all experienced it to some degree. I'd like to say I did what I did in baseball because my character was just better than everybody else's, or that my work ethic, but that's not true. The truth is, 1, I had a dad that I thought would kill me if I got in trouble. 2, I thought, I can't play baseball. I'm not doing that if I can't play baseball. So it was a carrot. It was an incentive for me. These kids don't have fathers in a lot of cases that are there to say that. So we can step in as a mentor. But we do have the incentive. And so some kids that'll go, I'm not going to go to study. I don't care about this. But if you say, but if you can play baseball and you can access to high level baseball, and that's what I've been so pleased about my time here in the community and be able to share the story is so many of the network and the people from the college coaches to the professionals, to the Drew Storins, to the Wes Whistlers, to the former players, Dallas Williams, guys that are coaching, that Mike Farrell, that has just been so instrumental in helping us bring this and are advocates for this, that we're reaching, also touching to current major leaguers and some guys that we've been involved with. So a lot of excitement. So that's how it gets to today. So
well, and from today, and I could just sit and listen to you talk. Anybody watching this, I know you are hearing the same thing I'm hearing, and this one word: passion. You talked about how you got to where you are, and I tend to think divine intervention, but how you got to where you are, what I see is you have a passion, you do the work, and you stay the course. And that's why it was important to me to hear your backstory and to share that before we even get to talk more about the base in Indiana, is because that backstory itself, it's part of what the base is trying to carry on with their mission, and just sharing that with people who may never have any affiliation with the base. Sharing that story that you have right there is truly inspirational, to say the least. But it brings us to today. The base is now in Indy. So take us through some of the events, some of the things that are going on here in Indy, forecast to the future, and then we're going to talk about how people can get involved.
Absolutely. The model in Boston, when they came here, I had to raise money to do this. It wasn't that they had a pot and said, here you go. Here's this salary and benefits and do this, said, you got to go do this. So I walked away, and there was a 9-month gap. Mm-hmm. My wife worked at Starbucks. And so I spent everything that I had saved and put away and earned and borrowed to get to that point in April to say, and we have, part of our mantra is, you got to earn your spot, meaning for the players, that it's not a handout. It's not an entitlement. You got to earn your spot to be a part of what we're doing. But if you do that, well, I took that to mean for me too. And that I had to do that. I had to earn my credibility. That, one of the things that I've asked, particularly in the Black community, is to say, what don't I know that I don't know? And to ask questions as I'm going in there. And so one of my friends in the community said, young Black men are not going to naturally trust a middle-aged white guy. And I just laughed and said, well, good thing I'm not middle-aged. And so I realized that I've got to earn my credibility with them. I've got to earn my spot. I had to go out and tell the story. And in this case, I had to put my money where my mouth is. It's not business that I get that back. But I had to go out and be able to, but I had to be free to tell the story. And that means I had to step away from U.S. Athletic, from lessons, from coaching at Heritage, and from anything else that I was doing, and to make this my singular focus is to find access and opportunities and build partnerships for the kids. So in April, Strata had made an initial contribution to sponsor us. The Indianapolis Indians have made a commitment to do that. And so we have begun to build a base of support here in Indianapolis. So they hired me in April to be their executive director. I'm the only employee. In Boston, there's a staff of about, I think, 16 or 17 in Boston, or in Chicago, there's a full-time staff, I think, of 3 that are up in Grant Park. And Eric Davis, not the Reds Eric Davis, but Eric Davis, that was the captain of Phi Slamma Jamma. And they have done a tremendous job up there in a building this old school that Magic Johnson has. And they are up there fighting, for every life and providing access and opportunity for kids up there and doing a tremendous work. So, but it's here and in Chicago and Boston. So Boston has provided some modeling to say this. They didn't have a plan to say we're going to expand all over. So here's the playbook for McDonald's. This is how you do it. So we've learned and adjusted and knocked on doors. So one of the things that you do that they did was, like the first event, was to have different events. We had one a year ago or last January, I should say, a year ago this coming June, at the Indianapolis Indians at Victory Field. They hosted up there, and there's about 40 people, and it's a wine, cheese, soft drink, come in, video presentation, bring some folks in, and just telling the story. So it's a safe place for folks to be able to come in and say, I want you to hear or meet or see what they're doing, and to be able to build that support. When I found that my job was going to be primarily raising money, I was like, oh no, I thought, boy, everybody, all my friends are going to go. And then I learned what kind of the secret is that I had, sort of a misperception about it, is that there are people in all walks of life. There are people who, like a guy in Boston, that's a real estate developer, a shipping guy, that his contribution is he writes checks, his ability to support. And there's other people in that place, but there's other people that helps tell stories like you, Dan. It says, I collect these hats. It's given me a platform that I can do some podcasts, and then I can get some messages out, that I can meet people, that I can be a connector. And so it's really your storyteller. And so that's what I learned that I'm doing, is I'm telling stories and meeting people along the journey, connecting up with friends, and that we're all like a huge team, not just 9, but a team of hundreds that we can fill in all kinds of different ways and paint this picture about what the base can be, in Indianapolis. And so we use those events. We used another one in April that we had at Strata Education. That was, and we tried to, they are first class. I don't think anybody would come and say it's a well run, it's professional event. Steve had been there, and they all just go off very well. We had the Urban Classic in the summer with the teams, and then at Salesforce, we were up at the very top, overlooking the entire city. Drew Storen, Jeff Mercer, there, and Robert Lewis came in, and we had folks from all over really the state and there, and telling the story about what baseball can be in our cities, and how to provide opportunity and access for kids that through education that maybe we've left behind. And so we will have some more of those events, and be having those in quarterly probably, and certainly the Urban Class come up in the summer, but another spring event, probably one in the fall, where we'll continue to do tell our story.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll first throw out there, and we'll have this linked everywhere we post this, your website, of course, thebaseindy.org, and you have all your history, how to get involved. And I just want to kind of accentuate what you were talking about. There are people that are check writers, and there are people that sweep floors. And when I reached out to you a while back, I said, I'll sweep the floor. I don't care. I want to get involved. I love what you're doing, and the passion that you're telling this story is in itself saying that this is something that's going to be around, and it's something that's going to grow. It's got a track record of success. As other than going on the website and hitting the donate button, what are some other ways that people can make those connections and get involved with this great program?
Sure. There's a few ways, I think, that and as we evolve, the program is going to have needs, both as far as equipment. It's going to, there are points where you have needs as far as labor. I recognize that travel, high school teams, they fundraise for every penny they can get for themselves, and they need that. And I can completely understand and appreciate that. I think one of the things that to me has been just tremendously valuable is that when people just get together like this, and you can tell the story, because when you're passionate about it, when you hear it, and you'll have for a while, even through this, beyond this, just in your personal relationships, you'll come across somebody and go, I met somebody here you've got to talk to, you've got to get. And so the introductions and the personal connections and staying in touch, I think are important, because to me, I see us as a baseball community. I see Indiana high school baseball. That's me. That was who in 1985, we lost to South Bend, Washington in the Final Four at that point, and they got beat by Kokomo, but that was at the old Busch Stadium. And I came up, and I was a first team All-State catcher, and I was on the North-South All-Star team at Anderson. And so in all of the years after that, the number of coaches, the Don Brandons of the world, and the college coaches and the relationships with the high school coaches. You know, I see the Alexandria, Jeff Klosser, and I think of JD Klosser, little JD coming in. You go, just the number of kids and families and high school coaches. And I feel like that we all know that. And it's not just here, that it's throughout the state. And the base, although we've got to have a hub and a center in the place. And by the way, where I found it in Martindale, Brightwood, in that area, I basically took a police IMPD heat map and I said, where are the places with the most trouble? Where are the places where there's the most crime, warrants, and police calls in the course of last year? And I looked at it, and it was basically 4 areas. And I said, what about this one? And so that summer, before I committed to do this, I would drive, I'd get off at 65 at Washington Street, and I'd drive up and down Sherman, and I'd say, I'd drive up there at all times of night, and I'd see 10 cars over here with the lights out at 10 o'clock at night and go, man, that does not look good. I drove up here and go, there's a police car. There's 10 police cars with looks like 100 people out at this at 38th Street. And Sherman go, what is going on at this? And I said, it's somewhere around here. And in God's infinite power, you know, in last May, or last February it was, Taisha Sellers, who's the head of Edna Martin Christian Center, has got all kinds of wraparound social services and educational services. It said, we have an idea about what to do with Frederick Douglass Park, potentially building a new facility, everything, this park, and we want the base. We want to talk to you about the base bringing her. So I met with the Indy Parks, who become tremendous supporters and friends. Matter of fact, when we went back to Fenway this year for the second time, we took 20 people from Indianapolis out there. So as far as what to do, I think get in contact and say that interested. And as things evolve, I'll stay in touch. And we have people sometimes that say, I've got some folks that can help a field, or I know somebody that's got a tractor here, or I can help put up these cages, or we've got these cages, or what about, you know, these mats or mounds or other things that they can do. But I also think, and I'm working on this, is trying to do this. I also think that one of the things that you have, that we all have for our kids, is to say, I'm not sorry that my kids started on second or third base. I'm glad that they did. The only thing that requirement, and I think all of it should be that. We always want to say, you know, we're always trying to we want to provide a better place than even where we started for our kids, or at least where we started for our parents provided us. But I think the one thing that we all ask of our children is to say, but when they cross that plate, we want them to know and to be thankful and to stop and not say, I'm entitled or I'm better than anybody else. To say, they want to turn to dad and say, thank you. Turn to coach and say, thank you for this opportunity that you've given me. I realize the amount of time and money that it costs, and I'm aware of that. And if that's all they do, that's fine. And there are some kids and families that are going to say, you know what? There's other ways that you can do it as your career advances. And I've been contacted by lots of former players who are, you know, executives at Allison or Roche or different places that say, we want to help and we want it to be a part. And so I look at us as almost a big fraternity or sorority of baseball nuts. There you go. We love and understand the power of this game, and we want to use a national pastime to say, if we can bring this to some young people, and we can teach our kids to bring this to young people and blow away and change some of these racial mindsets and begin to knock down and go, that the white kids aren't what some of the black kids think, and the black kids aren't some of the white kids think, and that the poor kids have access that the other kids have, and we can provide that, then I think we've done our community and our city and our state and beyond a tremendous service. So I hope that those relationships, as we have events, that we can invite people into those conversations.
Well, and you know, first of all, you're called the base. You know, you talked about you're located in Indy and you're called the base. I kind of think of you as the hub, because you're going to have spokes, and they're going to reach out. It's not just all about Indianapolis. You know, I'm speaking, we're going to have people viewing this from all over the state. You know, my fans number in the 5s, I think we now. So, but this is going to have some reach. But like I said, you are the hub, and there are spokes, and you know, I can't stress enough just the passion of what you're talking about. That's carrying over, and you know, kind of hinting at one of the things you said there at the end. It's about a stewardship of what we were given, and being a steward of it, not just to hold on to it, but also to increase and to spread and to share. And that's exactly what you're doing. You mentioned a couple teams here. As we wrap things up, any parting thoughts? What's a good takeaway? As we talk about the base, I could sit here and listen to you talk for another 3 hours. There's a few people that I've heard speak in my life. I heard Lou Holtz talk once for about 45 minutes, and it felt like 2. And when it was done, he could have told me to run through the wall, and I would have tried. Sitting here listening to you is one of those speeches as well. I can listen to anybody talk about anything when they're passionate about it and their heart's in it, and when it's aligned for a good purpose. And that's exactly what we're hearing here today. So just a couple takeaway thoughts, as we look at the base going forward here in Indiana and beyond.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I would, I'll tie on to one of the last things that I said, that regardless of where you're at in the state, there are young people around you with needs, and I think it's a wonderful place when you're a part of a team, whether it's a travel team, whether it's a high school team, that we can talk and our players, and we can help our players be more aware without pointing it out, going, can somebody bring Johnny a sandwich because your grandparents are here, your parents are here, everybody's going to have a sandwich but him. We're generally pretty good at that, but if we can take that to another level and we can pay attention to the shoes that somebody has on, or a glove, or a bat, and we can give that and share that with our teammates, with junior varsity, with freshman kids that come in, and our younger kids in our own community, and in places where there are just spots where we say, I don't know how to help them. I don't know what I don't know what I can do. In those cases, reach out to me. And if there are places that I have sorted through and that I have fought through to be able to find some access, some opportunities and places, then I'm glad to do that. And if it's beyond this, if it's sharing with a team, a coach, a team coming down, me coming up, players coming up, I think those are all wonderful experiences. So I find that one of the things that my parents, I don't think it was intentional at the time, but coming from a small town with a big newspaper, it's really a tendency that you can look at the headlines and go, that's me. That's everything about who I am. But it was sending me out to baseball camps where I was never the best player at the baseball camp. I don't know that I've been the best player on any baseball team, but I've been on baseball teams for a long time. And so I think that getting out of my community, getting out into the world and getting to see people who don't look like me, who don't think like me, who don't act like me. And in the baseball world, it's wonderful because I have former players coaching in Uganda. I have players that are playing in the Dominican Republic, in Puerto Rico, in Taiwan, in Japan. And, you have just all over the world. It's truly an international game, as we see on TV. But if there's anything that we feel like we're called to, place that we're called to do, and we talk about our neighbors, and if there's a place, I'm talking right for us today about Hoosier kids, Hoosiers, the kids that are right here on our right and our left and in our city. And if there's a time and a place you go, we can help those specific kids. And if we don't do it, then who does? And I said, I think that's our challenge. And I hope that we can do that in our own communities and our own teams, but also even can push beyond that and look in the cities and in northern Indiana and central Indiana and certainly southern Indiana.
Well, I'll tell you kind of my summary of this is, baseball, and I know you'll agree with this, baseball is an equalizer when it comes to, height, speed, race, nationality. Baseball doesn't care. You can be, like you mentioned, you can be Jose Altuve all the way up to Aaron Judge and everything in between. And the base is doing the same function as being an equalizer. And just hats off to you and everything that's being done. Now, speaking of hats off,
all right,
you're an Indiana guy, and I'm just Hardy the Hat guy. That's all I am. So I think you might know where I'm going here. I've got a little 5-hat challenge as we wrap things up. You talked about the spokes of the base going all over the state. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to challenge your knowledge of Indiana baseball via the hat. Okay, we're going to go try to go across the state, but these are all predominantly inner city schools. One college, the rest are high schools. Now, I got a feeling here because I know you're an Indiana guy and you're obviously a baseball aficionado. So let's see what you can do. We've had a couple people get 5 out of 5, and I think we're going to have our third here. Hat number 1. This is a Indianapolis inner city school and one of, if not the oldest public schools in Indiana.
That looks like Short Ridge High School.
Yeah, it is Indianapolis Short Ridge. Good story of their assistant I met earlier in the year, doing kind of the same things. He's got a great, successful career, volunteers his time for Indianapolis Short Ridge. Just another good story. Going up to the northern part of the state, one of my favorite hats right here, and this is a northern inner city school.
Yeah, would that be South Bend, Washington?
That is South Bend, Washington. I got a feeling this was going to be a pretty easy challenge here for you. This might be a little tougher. This is Northwest Indiana, another inner city school. Met this coach earlier this year. Matter of fact, he is one of the proud recipients of my donated Expos hats that I've issued throughout the year. Can you name this one right here?
LS, would that be Lake Station?
Lake Station. I think I'm need to make these a little more difficult here. Lake Station Edison for sure. Getting out of northern Indiana here. This is still quasi-northern Indiana, I guess, with a B on the hat there.
Yeah, that one. It looks like a kid that a coach that went and played at UCLA. That looks like a UCLA Bruin hat, but I got a feeling that's a Muncie Burris hat.
Yeah, it sure is. The Muncie Burris, of course, known for their women's volleyball team. I think it is 25 or somewhere around their state championships. Got to meet their AD this year. Let's go to the college ranks. This is a college in a city here in Indiana.
Yep, that's a good one and a great school and up and coming program. Know several of their players. Several players I've coached have gone on and played there. Marian University.
Yeah, Marian University. I tell you, I could have put. I think I probably could have put any hat in the state on that, and you probably would have got it because there's a few people I've met along the way that are as big baseball nerd, and I know you'll take that as a compliment as myself. And so as we wrap things up here, Mr. Barber, I seriously can't thank you enough for joining us today. You've got a great cause. If you're watching this, folks, make sure to go to thebaseindy.org. And to recap this whole thing, this is one of our later episodes in this series that we're doing, but it's the same theme reiterated perfectly. Have a passion, do the work, stay the course. Everything from your career that led you up to the base to everything you're doing right now with the base. All those people that you've met have got you to where you are right now. Stay the course, good sir, and things are going to happen. So thank you.